BeTheTalk, bonus episode 351, featuring Stephen Adler. Welcome to BeTheTalk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself. I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. We are live again with Stephen Adler. Stephen, are you ready to talk?
I am ready to talk.
We're back with Stephen Adler. This is a bonus session because his talk is all about the Ocean Data Challenge and the Ocean Data Alliance. And we didn't talk about that Talk Universe at all. So if you want to hear Stephen's bio, you can listen to the last episode. Actually, I'm going to summarize it right now. He invented internet insurance, enterprise data privacy, data governance, and people data. And he's had all kinds of accomplishments and awards. You can hear a little bit more about that in the prior episode. But let's talk about the Ocean Data Alliance right now. Everybody's concerned about the ocean. I've interviewed several people about the plastic straw epidemic in earlier episodes, so we're not new to the issues. But please tell us about your cause.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, I've organized an event called the Ocean Data Challenge at the United Nations headquarters on January 17th and 18th to bring together a really, really diverse group of leaders from around the world to talk about the challenge of radically increasing the amount of ocean observation. I'll talk about that in a sec. Better leveraging the amount of data that we've already collected and really changing the culture of marine science, conservation, and the way we work with the oceans. So as you said earlier, the oceans are facing enormous stress. In the last 65 years, humans have basically plundered almost all of the wealth out of the oceans, or at least the biological wealth. We've taken about 90% of the fish out of the oceans. Some fish species around the world are depleted down to like 3% of historical ranges, like tuna, this big pelagic species. We all know that whales have been hunted to, in some cases, near to extinction. We're facing really significant biological collapse in many parts of the ocean because of overfishing, but also because of climate change, global warming, farm runoff, nitrates. We have dead zones in different parts of the ocean. And all of these issues are we read about them often, but we really don't have persistent ocean monitoring. What I mean by that? Well, the way we basically learn about the ocean today is the same way we've been learning about our world for the last 100 years. We put some people on a boat, we stick the boat out in the middle of the ocean, they draw a banker, they put some gear into the water, they measure a bunch of stuff, they collect samples, they go back to their labs, and they study it for 5 years. And what they learned about the ocean at the moment they were there. But, the ocean's full of water. It's swimming around all the time. And so what we get spot analysis for a period of time. It's a snapshot. But we don't really have any persistent ocean observation. We don't have sensors in the water all the time. Well, we have wave sensors now. For the last decade, NOAA has had 3,800 Argos buoys that float around the ocean. But gathering persistent information about biological health, about chemistry, about salinity, about temperature, about what's happening on a regular basis, we haven't cracked that nut yet. It's been too expensive, too bespoke, and I want to change that. I want to find ways of getting the private sector involved, bringing down the cost for persistent ocean observation, and collecting lots of real-time data and sharing it. Not just for science, not just for conservation, that's great, but for industry, for insurance, for tourism, for manufacturing, for maritime sector. I think the ocean can provide vast amounts of people, not only on the coast, but also inside, with really meaningful information that can change your lives. Now, I want to give you one example that I think is really illustrative. You asked me earlier about the beginning of the internet 35 years ago. I'm going to tell you a story about 1993. Long before Al Gore started getting us upset about climate change. In 1993, a young woman, Navajo woman, came into a community health center in New Mexico, breathing hard. And she had a typical Ebola-like symptoms. She had blood coming out of her nose and her ears, and she had high fever, and she could barely breathe. And 6 days later, she died because her lungs filled full of blood, and she suffocated. And over the next 6 months, 45 people would come down, Navajo would come down with the same disease. 27 would die. in 4 states: Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah. There's a little circle right between them. And it became quickly, of course, you can imagine, the Navajo were quickly stigmatized for this disease. And the Center for Disease Control sent some doctors out to New Mexico to figure out what this was all about and how it happened. And after exhaustive investigation, talking to village elders, they learned that that year had been a year of intense precipitation, heavy rainfall. We now know that the El Nino effect, the warming of the southern Pacific Ocean, causes torrential rains in the southeast of the United States when it occurs. It's one of the offsets, if you will. And during that period of torrential rains, piñon, pine nuts, explode because they get so much water that it causes the trees to produce much, much more pine nuts. Pine nuts are a principal food for field mice. And so the population of field mice during that period exploded 10 times. The field mice seek shelter in human dwellings. The field mice carry a virus called the hantavirus. And the hantavirus is an Ebola-like virus that affects the respiratory system of humans. What happens is the mice excrete this virus in their feces. And when humans clean out the areas that the mice live in, they inadvertently breathe in the vapor. They breathe in the virus. And that causes them to get sick. Why do I bring up the story? Because it's a story of a group of people who live in a landlocked state, thousands of miles away from the Pacific where the temperature of the ocean is changing. Yet they are directly affected or indirectly affected by changes thousands of miles away in the ocean. Now, we see when the El Nino effect occurs, it isn't just people in New Mexico who are affected. In Colombia, the rains that usually come and provide abundance to the coffee crop disappear during the El Nino. And so with less precipitation, coffee yields plummet. That increases coffee prices around the world. We all feel that. At the same time, when the rains hit New Mexico, they don't hit California. And so we get forest fires. Now, these are all things that happen in a cycle, and they're related to changes in the ocean. But we can't monitor those changes in real time because we don't have persistent observation. And what we could do in the future is begin to anticipate how these subtle changes in the ocean will affect a whole cascade of impacts on land. And that's a data-driven discussion. And the reason I formed the Ocean Data Alliance and created this Ocean Data Challenge event was to bring a focus on the need for more persistent ocean observation, persistent and sharing of data across different disciplines, marine science, conservation, industry, data science, the IT industry, so we can better understand how even the most subtle changes in the ocean can affect many billions of people on land throughout the world.
So that's a lot to unpack. I heard all kinds of things in there. I heard what a lot of people would recognize as the butterfly effect. Tiny changes over here impact things on the other side of the world. As a fellow systems thinker, inputs and outputs and interconnectedness of complex systems really have all kinds of surprises in store for us. And essentially, would it be wrong to describe what you're proposing and implementing, Stephen, as a dashboard for the ocean, where you can actually measure and see, gauges in real time and be able to adapt to it ideally?
For some people, it could be a dashboard. But, the thing I've definitely learned in the last 30 years is that in the IT industry is that every community wants a different way of experiencing data. Yeah. And so I could definitely see that some people might like a dashboard. Some people might like a Jupyter notebook. Some other people, might like a JSON field. Other people might like globally linked repositories of open data. Some people will never look at any of that and would love to learn about how the oceans are changing by going to an art museum and seeing digital art about the oceans. I think we have to find ways of communicating these complex issues to people in the way they want to learn, not just in one way. So one of the things that we're definitely looking at in the Ocean Data Alliance is how we increase the ways that we can communicate data to different people in different languages, in different medium around the world, the way they want to learn.
What I appreciate about your response just now, Stephen, it's so important, and that's why I love interviewing TED and TEDx speakers, because deep subject matter expertise, unquestioned, but then also the second step of becoming a new expert or a human expert, someone that is willing to step outside the silo, to be able to seek first to understand rather than, bringing people into the silo with the language and the jargon and all of that. And I love that answer because you're really exemplifying that new expertise, which really nobody wants to listen to experts anymore. They want somebody to communicate in their own preferences, in their own language. So I just call it a human, a helpful human. So thank you so much. What's your final word of advice? I mean, this is a little bit heavy with this, the subject of the ocean and what we all need to do. What's your final word of advice for all of us, how we can help you achieve this?
Yeah, come and join us. The reason I organize this event at the UN is that I think there are a lot of people in private industry, whether in banking or insurance or in IT, who really want to make a difference in the world. They see that the world is changing. They read about plastic in the ocean and global warming and biodiversity loss. And they think, who's taking care of this? Who's working on this? My message to them is that all of us can make a difference in the world if we get engaged and get involved. And oftentimes we're just not invited. Well, I'm inviting you. I organize this event at the United Nations to invite people who want to make a difference to get involved and to participate and to help. And I know there are millions of people who may listen to this radio program and want to help. And I encourage you to check us out at oceandataalliance.com. Get involved. You can make a difference.
Stephen Adler, thank you so much for coming back on the talk and sharing this with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for listening to Be the Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.